Hi guys, sorry for making this a rushed video, which it's going to be, but I got to get back to work, so this is going to be a quick one. Today we're going to take our portal and we're going to put our first source code in there, and it's going to start a web server for us. And that web server will be the thing that will serve up the pages for our portal. So I've created a directory, so my WS subdirectory here is where I keep all my projects. I've created a directory for my project called JK Portal. So create a similar directory, but with whatever name you want to name your portal. Okay, I've got a single file in here called deps.eden. Okay, this is my Clojure control file that tells Clojure what libraries it needs to start up with. So I will start by opening deps.eden. Okay, so now here in our Eden file, I've depended on three libraries. One is called Ring Jetty Adapter, and this is actually our web server here. So Ring is a protocol. It's a standard for how HTTP requests and responses are going to be handled by Clojure. Jetty is a web server written in Java. So this basically takes a Java web service but gives us a Ring interface that we can use in Clojure. And then there are REPL libraries that we use to evaluate code. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is start a terminal, start Clojure. Okay, that's our Clojure and REPL. I'm going to hit escape, and then I'm going to pound to go back to my deps. Okay, we need some source code. So let's go space FT to put us into nerd tree. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say M for menu, that's the nerd tree menu, and I'm going to say A to add a child node. Okay, so you see here this is our project root here. So this is the file I'm going to create. I'm going to create a file called src. All our source is going to go into the src directory, and my namespace is going to be called jkportal.main. So to do that, we have to follow the same structure in our path that we're going to name our namespace as. So it's going to be jkportal/main.clj. Okay, so I type that, hit enter, it's created the file. I can now open the file, and it's an empty file. So the first thing we need when we create a new namespace is we need a namespace declaration. So that looks like this. An s jk main jkportal.main. Okay, so again, this namespace name here has to match the directory structure. Right now we've got one directory and one file called main.clj, so it's just got to match up. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a require block in here, and then I'm going to require ring.jetty.adapter. I'm going to refer to run Jetty. Okay, run Jetty is a function that lives in this namespace. So by doing this, naming the namespace here and saying refer and having an array of symbols here, or a vector of symbols here that are the functions from that namespace that I'm going to want to use. So I can say comma er, make sure this connects. Okay, so the thing about Ring, the way Ring works is you have this idea of a handler function. Okay, so I'm just going to create a handler function, and we can talk about it once it's created. So it's just a regular defn. We'll just call it handler. It's going to take a request object, and it's going to return a response object. And the response object was going to look like this. Status, this is our HTTP status code. 200 means success. I'm going to have a map of headers. And there's one important header that we need, is called content type. This basically tells the browser how to interpret the content that we're sending it. And we're going to say text/HTML. And our body is just going to be a string. I'm just going to say hello, And I'll put a little HTML in here to prove that it's working. Hello world. Okay, so that's some HTML. So there's our handler function built. Okay. Now, if I want to start a web server, this is how I do it. Run Jetty, I give it my handler, and I give it some properties. One is going to be the port number that it listens on. Now this is going to be a unique port, and it's going to be running kind of long term on our machines, hopefully. So we have to choose a port name for our portal. I'm going to choose the year of my birth. Might as well. So that's 1965. So you can choose that, or you can choose whatever you want. Just don't choose 8080 or something like that, because you'll always conflict with something. Oh, and by the way, it's got to be more than 1024. So I have this, need to say join false here. Okay. Now I could run this, I could eval this thing, but the problem is what this function returns is a Java object that's a running web server. And once it returns that, if I haven't captured the result, I can't do anything with it. I can't start and stop the server. So that's a problem. So instead of doing that, I want to keep track of that value. So what I need to do is store it in a mutable variable, which is a problem for Clojure. Luckily, Clojure's got a solution. It's called an atom. So an atom is a data structure that I can stick something in and get it back later. So let me go up here and build that. Okay, so we create an atom with this atom function, and the initial value is going to be nil. Def once is just like def, except if I eval it, it doesn't replace the value. See, if I had a web server sitting in my atom and I just had def here, if I reevaluated the whole buffer, it would kind of forget about that running server and create a new atom that was empty, and I would lose track of my server again. So def once is a handy way to protect ourselves so that we don't lose track of our running server. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this run Jetty and I'm going to wrap it in a start function. Start. Now the way that you take a value and stick it in an atom is with a function called reset. So what I'm going to do is I get to do something like this. Reset. There's an exclamation mark here. Web server. Okay. So now this should start our web server. Okay. So let's go -EB to evaluate our whole buffer, and it gave me an error there. I think the problem might be this. I think that might be the right namespace. Okay, that looks better. All right. So we'll go down here. This little doohickey is a little thing that tells the reader ignore the next thing. So we can put something like start here, and what this does is it just tells the reader if I evaluate my whole buffer, don't evaluate this form. Otherwise, every time I evaluated this namespace, it would start my web server, which I don't want, but I just want to quickly start it now. So now that I've got this, I can go inside this and I go -ER, and oh, it looks like from here, it looks like it's returned a Jetty server object. That's good. Should be in my web server atom, so that's good. Okay, cool. So let's go over to Firefox, and let's say localhost colon 1965, which is the port we listened on. And cross our fingers, and there's our hello world. Cool. Now, the other problem that we want to be able to do is we want to be able to stop our web server. So let's write our stop function. We'll go in the same namespace, go up here and run defen stop. And I will say, well, I'm going to do this conditionally because if there's no web server, there's nothing to stop. So I can use a when block here. When at web server. Okay, and so what's that at sign there? That at sign is a shortcut that does a dereference of an atom. So in Clojure, an atom is different than the value that's inside the atom. So when we put an at in front of the name of an atom, we're saying, don't give me the atom here, give me the thing that's inside the atom. Okay. So another way to write this is like this. I could have done this. It does exactly the same thing, but this is kind of the conventional way to do it. So I say, basically here it says, when there's something inside the web server atom, I want to call this dot stop function on the web server. So this just calls a Java function called stop on the web server. And then once the web server stopped, I can forget about it. So I just reset the web server to nil. Now the last thing that I want to do is every time I start, if I just keep starting, I'll just keep overwriting the web server. So before I start, I always want to make sure that I stop. Okay, so there's our running web server, comma EB to evaluate the whole buffer. Looks good. And what I'll do here is I'll do another one of these. Stop, comma ER. Okay, and let's go back to our here. I'll do a Command R to refresh this thing, and now there's nothing there. Alt Tab, go up here, comma ER to restart it. Alt Tab, Command R to refresh, and there it is. So that is our web server in Clojure.